Hello and welcome to episode 1 of my Git By Example series. If you missed the intro episode, check out the playlist linked right up here, which will have that and every future episode as they come out. So there we discussed why Git is important, how it works on a sort of high level, and we also initialized our first repository. So today we are going to move into actually interacting with our repository. So go ahead and navigate to wherever you put your repository, and we will jump right in. So there are a few different files that you're going to see are common to most repository, and the one that is pretty much common to every repository you'll see is a README file. So a README file generally gives an overview of the project that you have, sort of installation and configuration instructions if those are applicable, credits to different programmers for different parts possibly, some basic documentation usage, and things like that. So READMEs can be written in a variety of formats, ranging from plain text to restructured text to many other options, but the most common option is Markdown. So if you already know Markdown, then that's great, but if you don't, then go ahead and check out the Tech by Example episode I made on Markdown. You can learn it in, I think, 15 minutes is the length of that video. So to create our README, we're just going to make a file called readme.md. So we just go ahead and do that. And this is going to be the file that's rendered on the front page of our repository when we push it to a remote server like GitHub, which we will get into later. So now we can just go ahead and interact with our README. So that's going to pop up right here. So here, what we are going to want to do is generally, we started off with just the title of the repository. So I'm just going to call this Git Example repo. You can call it whatever you want. And we just generally have also a brief description of what it is. So I'll just have this repository is an example for my Git By Example series. So now we can go ahead and save that, and we're going to jump right back into our terminal now. So now we have some content in that file. So if we want to see the status of our repository now, we're going to use the git status command. So what git status does is it's just going to give you sort of really the status of your repository and your working directory specifically right now. So you'll see we don't have any commits yet, and we have an untracked file. So what that means is that you need to specifically mark files as things that you want GitHub to track, or Git rather, to track. So here, our README, we just created it. We didn't tell Git to add it to anything that we're tracking just yet, so it's just going to be sitting there. So if we want it to be tracked in our next commit, then what we need to do is we need to add it. So we add with the git add command. So there are a few different options of how you can use git add. So the most basic thing is just to put the path to the files that you want to use. So we can git add readme.md, and now if we git status again, we will see that now it is a change to be committed instead of being just an unmarked file or an untracked file. So the other options you could do is you could do git add dot, and that will add everything in the current repository. You can do git add -- all, and that's going to add every single file in your project to it. Those are generally the forms that you're going to see for that. So now that we have it tracked and we've staged it for commit, we can make our first commit. So there are a few things to note when we discuss using git commit. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is there are two ways to make a git commit. So the first is just to run git commit. So what running just git commit will do is it will go ahead and open up a editor right here where we can put in our commit message, and from there you can type out your message, and finally you can commit with that message. So that's one option, but the other option, and the one that I think is just generally better and more concise, is to use git commit -m and then just put your message on the end here. Unless you have a really complicated commit message, which you probably shouldn't have anyway because that's considered bad form, you're just going to want to do that. So the other thing to talk about is how we actually structure our commit messages. So it is standard practice, and it is considered best practice to write your commit messages in the imperative form. So that means that you're giving them like instructions. So instead of saying something like, I fixed this bug, you would just say fix bug. So the one exclusion from this rule is generally your first commit, which in most repositories I see is just the text initial commit. So we're just going to go ahead and use that as our commit message right here. And let's go ahead and commit it. So now that we do that, you'll see we have some information about the file we just committed. And if we check our git status, we can see that our working tree is clean because we are up to date with the most recent commit. So now that we have that covered and we've done our first commit in our repository, we're going to talk about some other stuff that has to do with staging and committing files. So to do this, first I'm just going to add another dummy file. So I'll just call this dummy.md. This is just going to be an extra file that I'm going to use. just to mess around with. Because I need another file to just do stuff with. So there we go. We're just going to create that with some gibberish. It doesn't really matter what's in there. And we're going to start off by talking about how we unstage a file. So let's say that we ran git add dot, thinking that we were tracking everything we wanted to track, but then when we track git status, oh, this dummy.md file, I didn't actually want to stage that just yet. So how we can remedy this is with the git restore command. So if we go ahead and type git restore -- staged, you'll see that it's actually telling us about that right there, and then the path to our file. My tab did not work there. Okay, so if we just do git restore -- stage, what was it, dummy.md, and then we git status again, we will see that now it is back to being untracked. So this is functionality that was previously in the git reset command, but in Git 2.23 they broke out a bunch of functionality from like bloated commands like git reset that does a bunch of different things into their own things just to make things a little bit more verbose. So the one thing you want to be careful of here is make sure that you have that -- staged flag, because if you don't, then it's just going to actually reset that file in your working directory completely to its state that it was in at your last commit, which may lose a bunch of work if you were doing work and then you just tried to unstage something that you did a bunch of work on. So now that we have a good understanding of how to add a file, let's go ahead and talk about some other functions that we can do, specifically deleting and moving. So what we're going to do here, so we have our second dummy file right there, and we're going to talk about Git's wrappers for deleting and moving files. So if you want to delete a file that's in a Git repo, first let's just go ahead and commit our dummy file just to have it in a commit, and here we're going to use the -a flag on commit, which is a shortcut to essentially do git add -- all beforehand. So then we'll just say this, we're adding dummy. So if we do that, oh, right, because it's not tracked at all, we do have to actually add it first, and then we'll just do that. Okay, so now that we have that done, and we have our dummy file being tracked in a commit, we can talk about how to delete it and how to move it the Git way. So you can theoretically just delete the file and then git add everything, but if you want to do that as a shortcut, Git provides the git rm shortcut. So if we git rm dummy.md right here, then you will go ahead and see if we run git status again, then it is already staged the deletion of that, and also if we ls, the file is gone. So that is how you do rm. You can also just rm the file normally and then run something like git add -- all, and that will do the same thing, but this is just a handy little shortcut. So now that we have deletion down, we're going to talk about moving and renaming files, which is something where Git treats things a little bit interestingly. So Git doesn't actually have a mechanism built into it for renaming a file. So there's no command to say, hey, this file is actually this file but renamed. The way that it actually does this is just it implicitly figures out, are these two files extremely similar in most of their blobs? And if so, okay, this is probably just a rename because this one disappeared and this one appeared. So the way to do this is either just to you can just rename the file like you normally would, or you can use the git mv command, which will also stage the change for commit. So if we just go ahead and we're not going to commit our deletion of that, so we're just going to git restore -- saved. And then now if you see here, that is going to have unstaged our commit, and we can finally git restore dummy.md. Yep, that worked. Sorry, it's behind my camera right here. So now if we go ahead and do that, we run ls, you'll see that we got our dummy file back because Git was still tracking it, which is pretty cool. So let's say we wanted to rename it. So we could run git mv dummy-md, and we're going to call that fake.md instead. So if we go ahead and run that, then if we ls, you'll see that it has renamed the file to fake.md, and if we git status, you will see that it figured out that we renamed dummy to fake. So now with that, we really understand all of the basics for how we're going to modify files, how we're going to stage those changes for commit, and commit them. So in the next episode, we're going to go over a very important part of any Git repository, and that is the git ignore file, which is how we exclude files from our repository automatically. So that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed. I'm just going to quickly commit this change right here. And we're just going to end it right at that. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you stay tuned for the future, and I really look forward to getting into the more advanced Git features now that you understand the very basics. I will see you in the next one, and goodbye.